everybody, this is Rachel from Mini Ministry, coming to share with you today one of the women that I think definitely, biblically speaking, would qualify for the title, Worst Wife Ever. Now that's a very harsh statement because you got to be pretty bad to be declared the worst wife ever. But let me tell you about the background of this and then maybe you'd understand why I come to that conclusion. We find ourselves today in the book of Job. If you're not familiar with Job, let me give you a quick background to basically what the book entails. Job is the account of this man of God. In fact, he's called by God a man who is righteous, who a man of integrity, a man of worth and stature. He is an important guy. He's also a wealthy man in the town. He is known and known of. Very important guy. Job finds himself in a conundrum. Satan goes to God and it's like, you think you're this great guy. And God's like, have you seen my servant Job? He is amazing. No matter what you do, he is going to love me and serve me and declare my goodness because he knows who I am and he knows who he is in me. And Satan's like, really? You sure about that? What if you took away all the good things he has? Would he still love you? God's like, well, yeah. Satan's like, well, prove it. Okay, so he tells Satan, you can do everything. You can take all he has. So he takes his children away. He takes away his items, his stuff, all his oxen and his sheep and all the stuff that he had. Because remember, he's a wealthy man. And everything's gone. And it's him and his wife. And he's sad. Wouldn't you be sad? I'd be sad if everything just disappeared. Don't get me wrong, it's just stuff. But I would be sad if all my books, my little library kind of disappeared. I would be sad. But then, at the end of the first trial that he goes through, Job says this, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be stripped of everything when I die. The Lord gave me everything I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise be the name of the Lord. See, Job knew that no matter what the stuff was that he had, all the wealth, all the animals, all the possessions he owned, it was nothing compared to knowing God and being God's servant. That's what he really cared about. But then Satan goes back to God and says, all right, sure, he did fine with that. That's because we didn't really hurt him individually. Let me do that. And God's like, okay, you can do everything short of taking his life. You can't take his life. Satan's like, all right. So he strikes him with these boils. And can you imagine your skin just nasty and gross? And it tells us in chapter 2 of Job that he was scraping his skin with a piece of pottery just because of the feeling of his skin and what had happened to him. I can't imagine. That is just terrible, right? So he's in pain. He's uncomfortable. All his stuff's been taken from him. His children are dead. It's terrible. His servants are gone. His oxen, all the good stuff. All his livelihood's gone. But what gets me is how his wife replies. His wife is never named. We'll just call her Job's wife. But she says, as he sits there and scrapes his arms and his body with all this, and his wife said to him, are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Just curse God and die. This, my friends, is why I label this woman as one of the worst wives ever. Here is a man who is completely known to be a man of integrity. Even God declares him to be righteous. If God declares him to be righteous, imagine how much everybody around him saw. He was probably a trustworthy man, a man who helped and served and gave and was responsible because he was good with everything he had. He was wealthy and he was known of and all these things. And no one more than the wife knows who the husband's all about. And this wife saw it day in and day out, how great he was with his livestock, what a good father he was, how good he was. Okay, I use that term best I can there. And then this moment comes where God has Job tested. And the wife, knowing how righteous of a man he was, saw his faith throughout their marriage, I am sure, sees him at his lowest point. Now, surely the children being gone and the things being lost affected her as well. She was saddened, right? Those were her children also. That was their livelihood that has been affected. And now her husband being stricken and afflicted in his body, that is her husband. And surely she is just overwhelmed by all of this. But even giving that, her statement here, I find just so crazy to me. Even though You're a man of integrity. Just let go of your integrity. Let go of who you are. Curse God and die. It doesn't matter to her that he has been a faithful God follower, that he still believes in who God is. He is righteous. We just read a minute ago what we saw at the end of chapter 1. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Praise be the name of the Lord. I'm paraphrasing that. But that's what he's saying. He was still glorifying God, right? And now comes along his wife after all of this, and she's like, just curse God and die. Just let go of your faith, and maybe this will all go away. I got to tell you, as a biblical wife, I am so offended by this woman. I am so offended, and here is why. As wives, and this goes for you as men, as the spouse of your wife, as the husband, as a spouse, your job is to build up your spouse, to love them, to encourage them. And especially as wives, we are the helper. The last thing we should be doing is tearing down our husband. Not only tearing him down, but then tearing down his faith within that. Not just telling him that, just let go of who you've been, Job. Just forget about you were an upright man and you had all this integrity and you were humble and all this good. Just not even forgetting all that. But just curse God. Go completely the opposite direction. Because obviously, if you were such a God-fearing man, maybe this stuff wouldn't have happened to you. I'm sure that's what was going through her head. And I think a lot of it was probably said in anger to him. Because, again, she's lost her livelihood and her children and all that went with that. And yet, I'm still perturbed by this statement. Every time I read the book of Job, I get perturbed by it. Every time. Because you know what? I can't imagine how Job felt in that moment. I mean, think about it, my friends. Here Job is, everything's been stripped from him. All the things he worked so hard for. The man he strived to be a good steward of all that God had endowed to him. And he handled it well and faithfully. People knew of him. God called him righteous. He obviously was a great guy. And all these things get taken from him, and he's probably depressed as well. But then your wife, the person that you expect to be your best friend, the person you expect to run to walk with you through this valley, tears you down and says, just curse God and die. Let's just be done with it. This hurts my soul on a whole nother level, my friends. I gotta tell you, I love my husband a whole bunch, more than I can really put into words and the word love can entail. And though he might drive me crazy, no matter what happens, I can't imagine tearing him down in a way that would make him want to disregard his faith. We should be encouragers to our spouse and love one another. And this is complete opposite of that. She undoubtedly saw his faith all these years. And in this one moment where he is tested, and while it's a very big test, it's a huge trial, the first statement we read from this wife is a negative one. And I can't help but just think of how that changed their marriage, changed the way they looked at each other, changed how their household was run. And it's a reminder to all of us that how you speak to your spouse has effect. If you go to your spouse and you just tell them, oh, you're not worth my time. If you sat there with your spouse and you're like, oh, I don't really care what they're saying. If you don't give your spouse the time of day, and if you tear them down, if you say negative things and never positive ones, it's not going to be a healthy relationship. God desires for us as husbands and wives to love one another. We are to speak words of affirmation, words of truth and goodness. Not just to our spouse, but to everybody, but especially to the person you're married to. It is easy, I think, in our humanness, that when bad times come, we just forget about our faith and just throw it above and say, you know what, maybe it's just easier not to believe, because maybe that's what's causing the problem. But you know what? God is a good God. He's the only God there is. And he loves us so much. And even in this moment, through the account of Job, we read that, you know what? He was restored by the end of it. Casey, I've ruined it for you. I'm sorry. But after all the trials and after the conversations with his friends and his friends going against him and questioning him and then him questioning his faith and all these things, God restores him better than what he had before. I think it's Luke 16:10 that tells us when you're good with little, you'll be given more. He was already a wealthy man. And even though all had been taken, God restored him and gave him even more. My friends, God is good. And the trials and the valleys and the downfalls that we face does not make God any less good or our faith any less valid. What it does make is it can make our faith stronger, and it makes us wiser, and it gives us greater understanding to so many things. So I want to encourage you that when those trials come, because they will come, my fellow believer, when those trials come to you or to your spouse, that we have the words of Job in our mouth. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Praise be the name of the Lord. That at the end of the day, even though we're sad in our human spirit, even though we're struggling, even though we're fighting against a lot of things in this world, we will still praise the one who is worthy of praise. So yeah, Job's wife, definitely easily one of the worst wives ever, in my opinion. But you know what the great thing is? We don't have to be that way. We can choose to be different. We can choose to give words of affirmation. We can choose to love our spouse. And that when those moments come, we can just say, honey, I'm praying for you. God is still good, and Jesus still loves you. Maybe that's really what's needed in that moment. I hope you all have a great day and a great week. And until next time.